if you ask any of these members who are seated here to show you their phones, there is a Harambee invitation for Harambee to pay for kids to go to school. There is a Harambee for a person to go to hospital. And then, Mr. Speaker, in this bill, it talks about, which I really detest completely. It says, this is an act of parliament to provide a framework for regulations in the conduct of public fundraising appeals to promote. I begin by saying that I have no beef with people coming together to be able to help one individual improve their status of living. Mr. Speaker, I grew up in a society where we encourage a lot of the Harambee movement. But I believe that the pace which we are taking now, Mr. Speaker, to be able to regulate fundraisings is completely ill-advised. And I say so, Mr. Speaker, because I've taken some time to read through this fundraising bill. And I do not support the proposals which are being made in this bill. Mr. Speaker, we are a society, a country, which now we should be working hard to ensure that every citizen has got access to free health care. We should be working so hard, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that every student, every young kid born from the Bundus of Narok or from the other Bundus of Lake Turkana are able to get access to quality and free education as well as healthcare. Mr. Speaker, what we are doing now by regulating this kind of fundraising is by making sure that we are condemning this generation into poverty. Mr. Speaker, I completely detest that approach. I've sat down there listening to the Chief Whip talking about when he went to school, that he could not have finished school without Harambee. That is very true to all of us. But are we going to stagnate and stay there for the rest of our generation? Or are we going to do things differently? Earlier on, in the morning session, Mr. Speaker, we had the Cabinet Secretary of Housing, Lands and Housing. And she made the statements here and said that Narok County, with 6 sub-counties, will be entitled to a minimum of 220 houses per sub-county. That makes it about 1,320 houses for Narok County. When I stood to inquire further on that, she said that that is just the beginning. Mr. Speaker, I want to invite my colleagues for us to discuss here is how do we make sure that if our funds are being deducted from our salaries, we can guarantee that those who have not been given an opportunity to get where we are, the state takes that responsibility. When you now require us to profile individuals who are going to be carrying out fundraising activities, Mr. Speaker, the only thing that I conclude is that we are content with being poor, and we are content with widening the gap between the rich and the poor. Mr. Speaker, you cannot say that you will maintain an annual register of persons licensed by it to conduct a public fundraising appeal under this act. You go further and you say that you are now going to have a cabinet secretary who is going to authorize. You go further and you say that in each and every county, Mr. Speaker, you're going to have a CC member who is going to keep a register. I think, Mr. Speaker, we are losing. We are completely losing our trajectory in terms of development in this country. If we were arguing, if the sponsor of this bill was saying, let us now regulate charitable organizations. Let us register charitable organizations that can be able to spell out their mission and goals. We regulate them and allow them to carry out fundraising. In America, where I spent almost 20 years of my life, we had non-profit organizations, we have charitable organizations, but now when it comes here and you're saying you want to be able to profile individuals and keep a list of individuals, I wish we were talking about keeping a list of charitable organizations. I think we need to change, Mr. Speaker. We need to start saying, when did the rain start beating us to a point where now primary schools, we are paying them, when we had made progress, when the late president came into power, where kids could easily go to school for free. Right now, Mr. Speaker, if you ask any of these members who are seated here to show you their phones, there is a Harambee invitation for Harambee to pay for kids to go to school. There is a Harambee for a person to go to hospital. And then, Mr. Speaker, in this bill, it talks about, which I really detest completely. It says, this is an act of parliament to provide a framework for regulations in the conduct of public fundraising appeals to promote transparency and accountability in carrying out of fundraising appeals and foster great philanthropy. How do you foster great philanthropy when everybody in this country knows that the only people who can come up with money are politicians? Aren't you just encouraging corruption then? Aren't you encouraging an issue where you are elected into office because of how much you can be able to give instead of meritocracy? I think we need to focus on developing this nation. We need to come up with policies that will ensure that we narrow this gap between the rich and the poor, those who have and those who have none. We made progress by introducing a new constitution, where now we have counties. You know, even the way we make legislation, Mr. Speaker, has got to change now completely. It has got to change. I long for the time that we will be sitting here and saying, in Tana River County, the residents of that county have decided that every child in that county will go to school for free, and that the money that they are being taxed will be able to be directed there. But now, if we are even regulating fundraising, and then in this same law you say you are excluding, I like what my good friend Bonnie Halwale said, we are excluding family fundraising activities. You know, I mean, seriously. I want to beseech all of us that we move away from this kind of legislation. We are over-legislating. I want to beseech all of us that we sit down and say, how are we going to make sure that we develop policies that will ensure that in future, a granddaughter of the majority whip or majority leader will be able to go to school and not having to worry about Harambees. You know? Yes. You know, this issue of majority leader, for us keep on saying Harambe, 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 is really pushing us back. We were profiled as a less developed country. We went up to now a medium developing country, a developing country. We have now gone to a point where now we are saying there are those developed nations. And when we go to these international conferences, and I'm sure my good brother, the chair of PAC, will tell you that when they went to COP29, our president did not even go. So it was just a room full of individuals who have got dreams but cannot be able to implement them. They were just talking about, we want to give Africa $1.3 trillion just because we spent $3 trillion in promoting warfare among countries. It's a talk shop. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to plead with the sponsor of this bill, my good brother, my good friend, the majority leader, to change to amend everything and say, let us regulate charitable organizations. That is number one. I will support him 100% on that. Number two, let us ensure that we've registered these non-profits such that if they are supported by an entity outside the country, whatever is imported here is not taxed again at the airport. Because you've seen, I'm sure the majority leader has received so many phone calls from NGOs saying, these books were donated to us, but they are now asking us to pay taxes. So, to save this, let us not limit it down to individuals. Let us come up with the proper regulations of charitable organizations. Let us persuade each county to say, what is the biggest problem? Recently, Mr. Speaker, I saw a Gazette notice where the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Foreign Affairs has decided to give immunity to one charitable organization called the Melinda Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And in the reasoning of giving that immunity, there's one word that caught my attention. This is a charity organization that has been set up to fight poverty. And that is now where we are giving them immunity. But that immunity only extends to expatriates who come and work in this country. But Kenyans who would have been co-opted to work in that company will not be immune. Come on. Why are we creating these different classes? Why are we profiling people? So I want to support, and I plead with Majority Leader, because he's one young man who is very, very intelligent and has really managed to change a lot of things, that let us, during the committee of the whole, change the act or the proposed legislation. Let us strictly regulate charitable organizations. Once we regulate those charitable organizations, the role of counties can now come in and say, because we all know our counties. We all know the status of our counties. We are informed by session paper number 10 of 1965. We are informed by the current situations of our division of revenue bill, our CARA, how money is divided. We are informed by the debate that we have on a daily basis of how we divide revenue, whether by the size of the land or by the number of people who are there. We're informed by the Kenya Bureau of Statistics that tells us about the poverty in our counties. Why can we then ensure that in each and every county, Mr. Speaker, charitable organizations that are set up to work there are helped, assisted, and they are registered based on the circumstances of each of that county? There'll be no interest of you supporting a charitable organization that is coming to Narok to be able to count wild animals. What for? But if you're telling me that you will go to West Pokot and ensure that you are funding a charitable organization that brings people together for cohesion, make sure that it supports education, I'll be among the first one to say, let's go for it. So, Mr. Speaker, to end, I would like to see this bill becomes law, but let us make it such that it doesn't profile people. Number two, such that it doesn't keep us stagnating. Let us now think like these developed nations that want to sponsor this charity organization. And you will know something, Mr. Speaker, as I wind up. A lot of these charity organizations will raise $1 billion. And they will say, we are going to fight poverty in Africa. And they will say, for Kenya, we'll give Kenya $200 million. I'm telling you, Mr. Speaker, and this is a fact, and you can go check. By the time that money lands to Kenya, 80% has gone into administration. Only 20% is what ends up fighting that poverty. So, Mr. Speaker, this is an area that I'm quite vast, and I want to support the majority leader in regulating charitable organizations. We want to make it easy for people to be able to improve their standard of living. If today I want to go to Senator Kipsang's home and support a local church there, I should not be regulated to do that, really. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chimera.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii. Hata mimi pia niweke